Chapter 109, Setting Things on Fire. Encrid locked eyes with the mage, Retshaw. Mags have eyes too, he mused. They also had noses and mouths, human features, after all. Humans all have reflexive actions, he remembered Jackson teaching him. And for that, he had prepared accordingly. All Encrid needed was to halt the vicious onslaught of thorny vines, even for a moment. To do so, he had a hidden card, a technique he had practiced numerous times before. What mattered most was timing. Now was the moment. Wielding his sword with his left hand, Encrid parried and dodged the vines until one struck the top of his left wrist with a thud. The leather gauntlet he had obtained from the Saw Corpse fanatic was shredded. In that instant, Encrid raised his right hand high. Retcha's brow twitched. She had seen him throw weapons several times already, so her reaction was natural. Retshaw judged that whatever he threw wouldn't be a problem, her magical barrier could repel most physical forces. But instead of a dagger, what flew toward her was a stone, a thin, crystal-like orb. Flash! A sudden burst of light erupted, far brighter than any torch. Reflexively, everyone, including Retshaw, who had fixed her gaze on the object Encrid had thrown, was momentarily blinded. For that brief instant, they lost their vision. SSHT, Encrid inhaled sharply and moved. He had waited for this moment, keeping his eyes on the ground the entire time. The glowing stone, which he had obtained from the mage in the sewer, had been a hassle to figure out how to activate. He hadn't anticipated using it this way. By employing the hide knife technique to conceal and throw it, and by showing an empty hand to lure Retshaw into complacency, his plan had worked perfectly. This series of actions created a paper-thin opening, and for Encrid, that was enough. Thud. The charging technique he had observed from a squire one day came to mind. Lowering his stance, Encrid dashed forward, gripping his sword with both hands. As he shifted his weight from back to front, he swung the blade vertically with all his might. Retshaw, her vision just recovering, screamed when she saw it. Her cry became her final words, her epitaph. Swoosh! Crack! The barrier shattered. It was a downward slash from a greatsword, delivered with full force, without hesitation for what might follow. The blade struck Retsha's head. Thunk! Crack! The blow broke through the barrier, tearing off her scalp, slicing her ear, splitting her collarbone, and exiting through her lower torso. Splurt! The blade disemboweled her, carving through 3/4 of her upper body. By the time it emerged near her waist, it had severed one of her arms as well. Chunks of flesh thudded to the ground as the mangled remains of the mage collapsed, spilling blood and entrails onto the floor. What could such a person say in their final moments? The light in her eyes faded instantly. Whatever she had intended to do in those last seconds was clear. Behind Encrid, the vines twitched once before collapsing lifelessly. Ha! Only then did Encrid exhale the breath he had been holding. He had known Retsha's barrier would break under sufficient force, a weighty, focused strike would do the job. Her disregard for daggers and her reaction to Finn's axe had been hints. This battle had been a culmination of everything he had learned, repeated countless times today. Even the glowing stone, hidden and utilized with the hide knife technique, had been part of the plan. Aren't you going to finish the rest? Encrid asked, snatching the glowing stone. The light would surely alert the city's inner forces and the wall's guards. Time was short. Swoosh! Finn moved first, with Torres following close behind. There weren't many soldiers left. Screams echoed atop the walls as the remaining enemies fell. The moonlight bathed Encrid, and even Torres and Finn, along with the enemy soldiers, saw the glow emanating from his back like a halo. He exuded an aura that felt anything but human, something entirely different. The scent of blood mingled with the faint aroma of roses atop the wall. It was an oddly intoxicating smell, like a newly crafted perfume, unique and memorable. Once they descended beyond the wall, it became Finn's domain. As if prepared in advance, she moved to a specific spot, dug into the ground, and retrieved a bundle. Supplies for emergencies, she explained. It seemed likely that an informant, someone referred to as Cat, had prepared it. Inside the bundle was a dirty torp. Without hesitation, she tossed it to Encrid and Torres. While they draped the filthy covering over their heads at the outskirts of the slum pressed against the wall, Finn silenced 2 curious beggars who had poked their heads nearby. With barely a sound, their necks snapped. Her precision was impressive, quintessential Finn. Ingrid had witnessed her Ilkara's fighting style mature into a skillful art through repeated encounters today. The majority of the slum's residents paid no attention, meaning there were no more witnesses. Under the cover of darkness and the tattered torp, the three vanished into the shadows. Trailing behind, Ingrid fell into deep thought. Repetition. As always, he replayed the day in his mind. When repeating today's events, Ingrid faced three distinct paths. Would choosing one and forcing his way through it suffice? Is it even necessary to choose just one? As he let go of the tension in his shoulders, clarity came to him. Why choose one path when he could use all three walls? Perhaps it was possible. The Greyhound's trap offered experience in being surrounded by elite forces. Battling the Lycanos pack taught him how to fight and evade in chaotic skirmishes. And Retshaw, with her rose vines, had been an excellent textbook opponent. To Ingrid, the Greyhounds, the Lycanos, and Retshaw were all training tools, valuable resources. Thus, he constructed today with them. It wasn't bad, all things considered. His wrist throbbed where the blow had landed on his gauntlet. Some attacks had been unavoidable, but his leather armor had absorbed the brunt of them. No fatal injuries. Sure, keep your head down. Patrol, Finn whispered. Ingrid ducked his head, feigning sleep. With most of their equipment hidden and the top draped over them, their disguise was complete. This stench is awful, one patrolling soldier muttered. Deal with it. Don't you know what's happening on the wall? They might have escaped here. Then why not just sweep through this place? Sure. What if all these people turn on us? Ingrid listened to the patrolling soldiers chatter through narrowed eyes. All right, let's move. Finn led the group with practiced ease, as if traversing familiar territory, guiding Ingrid and Torres without hesitation. As they walked, Ingrid lifted his gaze. Part of the city came into view, a distant bell tower, dirt roads, faint light spilling from within, and mostly dark alleyways. As Ingrid followed behind Finn, she fell in step with Torres, who was walking just behind her. When Torres shot her a look, as if to ask why she was walking next to him instead of minding her own business, Finn spoke up. Are all the border guards like that? Who? I mean, are they all at that level? Finn gestured with her thumb behind her, toward Ingrid. Torres pondered her question. A swordsman like that? Someone who could deflect a mage's twisted thorny vines with his sword instead of a shield, create openings, and cut through the vines with precision. A swordsman who, after being taught a few times, had somehow turned his specialty, the hidden knife, into a skill uniquely his own. A swordsman who could dodge between a Lycanos and enemy elite troops, gambling with his life and barely clinging on, yet holding his ground. And then, in the end, slashing through those charging enemies, wiping out both the Lycanos swarm and the elite soldiers as if it were nothing? Torres thought back to all the exceptional individuals in the frontier defense. Let's see. Eisen? Barney? Hyun? Could they even compare? No. Even purely in terms of skill, Ingrid seemed to have crossed a threshold that made him something else entirely. Do you think that's common? Torres finally replied. Who? Do you really think monsters like him are just everywhere? It was a strange feeling. Not long ago, Ingrid had been under Torres' command. When they sparred on the way here, they'd seemed like equals. But now? Ingrid was different. His level of mastery, the way he wielded his sword, it was like night and day. Torres sighed. Hearing that, Finn let out a faintly exasperated sigh of admiration. What kind of soldier was this Ingrid, really? Was this a squad leader until a few days ago? Just a squad leader? Finn wondered what would happen if she reported this back. She glanced around as she searched for the hidden messages left by the cat. At the same time, she found herself worried about whether others would even believe what Ingrid had done. While they were avoiding patrols by relying on moonlight and staying hidden in the shadows, the ruckus on the wall from earlier had subsided. Ingrid thought the sudden quiet was even more ominous. Ever since he'd dealt with the mage, his instincts had been sharper. But he knew better than to trust them too much. Overconfidence could lead to disaster. They had already used all three walls to climb over the fortifications, risking everything to make it this far. He wanted to see tomorrow arrive safely, so he kept his guard up, ready to react at the slightest sign of trouble. The three of them wandered the night until morning, and though they felt the strain of exhaustion, nothing else happened. The commotion on the wall didn't escalate into an uproar in the city. If anything, it seemed like the authorities were trying to cover it up. While they were hiding in a narrow alley, they overheard two patrolling guards talking as they passed by on the main road. Was there some kind of incident last night? I heard someone climbed over the wall. Sure. We've been ordered not to talk about it. You don't want to get dock pay for blabbing. As the guards moved further away, Finn muttered from behind. This isn't good. Why? The trail's gone cold. The cat is dead. So this was all for nothing? Torres asked, frowning. Finn shook her head. Not exactly. The cat left a message. But what? Finn groaned and explained, they buried it in a designated spot, right in front of the city gates. Why the gates, of all places? They must have been in a rush. If they failed to escape, it was probably their last hope. This complicated things. Torres nudged Ingrid. Got any brilliant ideas? We retrieve the item from the gate and leave. Simple as that. Simple? Do you really think that'll be easy? Is this even something to debate? Ingrid thought as he glanced at the other two. Their brains have turned to mush. Not that he could blame them. They'd been through a lot in the dead of night. On top of that, neither of them realized how much Ingrid's actions earlier had rattled them. His swordsmanship and his fearless ability to seize control of any situation that had been on full display last night. Let's set a fire. Who? We start a fire under the cover of night, then slip away while everyone's distracted. We can grab the item on the way out. If they're keeping quiet about what happened at the wall, it probably means they're waiting for intruders to make a move. Let's give them what they're waiting for. Finn's eyes gleamed. It was a brilliant plan. I should have thought of that, she scolded herself. Realizing her own mind had been dulled was enough for her to accept it. Finn was an excellent ranger. And an excellent ranger could also be a colossal troublemaker, at least from the enemy's perspective. When night fell, the three of them stayed hidden until they were ready. Then, they set fire to 6 different locations around town, including the haystack in front of an inn. The flames roared to life. Finn, bursting with energy, moved quickly and deftly, shouting out warnings to stir the chaos. Fire! Fire! Her voice added to the panic as the flames spread, allowing the group to move unnoticed under the cover of darkness. As Ingrid worked to stoke the flames, tossing oil stolen from the inn onto the hay, he couldn't help but think. We sure seem to start fires a lot. At this rate, he felt like he was becoming less of a knight and more of an arsonist. But the results spoke for themselves. Fire! The city's on fire. The chaos grew as the townspeople scrambled to contain the inferno. With all eyes on the blaze, Finn, Torres, and Ingrid slipped away. Just before the gates closed, Finn dug up the buried message. Looks like we're done here, Torres said. Both Finn and Ingrid nodded in agreement. It was time to return. On their way back, Torres asked, how did you know the mage's name? Ingrid had already prepared a lie. It was a lucky guess. There was a female mage during my mercenary days who killed a lot of my comrades. I just threw that name out there. Did that even make sense? The story was so implausible that it somehow sounded believable. Torres, overwhelmed, decided not to press further. What does it matter? Everything had ended well enough. That was all that mattered. In his office within the cross-guard fortress, Abner let out a bitter laugh. Ha! All of it, undone. In a single night. They had captured an enemy spy and extracted information from them. Using that, they'd set a trap, leaked false information, and prepared to eliminate any intruders. But never had he imagined anyone would actually infiltrate the cross-guard itself. And yet, somehow, the elite soldiers stationed at the tunnel point nearly wiped out. Reshaw, the mage? Dead. She wasn't someone who should have died here. The Thornvine Retshaw was a mage with a renowned reputation. If it had been a knight, at least that'd make sense. But it wasn't. They tried to lay low, waiting to catch the intruders. Instead, fires had broken out, and the infiltrators had vanished without a trace. They just started fires and left. Abner laughed again, an incredulous, bitter sound. His face wore a strange expression, his mouth smiled, but his eyes didn't. The genius strategist of Aspen. That was how people referred to him. And yet he'd been completely outplayed. How could he not laugh? Achoo! On their way back to the border guard, Finn sneezed. When Ingrid suggested they spar again once they got back, Finn thought to herself, this guy really is insane. Torres, on the other hand, politely declined. Aren't you tired? I'm exhausted. When they finally arrived at the border guard camp, Ingrid came across an odd scene outside the barracks. A bald man, dressed in tattered clothes that made him look like a beggar, was pleading with a soldier. The sight made Ingrid tilt his head in confusion. Chapter 110, Luck and Misfortune Arrive Unexpectedly. Finn and Torres entered first to give their report. Torres would handle the general details, with Finn assisting as needed. As for Ingrid, all he had to do was file his return report. Outside their lodgings, an unexpected figure appeared, Gilpin. His clothes were torn, his face bruised with a bluish tint, and one of his eyes was swollen half shut, though it seemed to be healing. He was limping, but his leg didn't appear broken. Let me take a look. After a quick assessment, it seemed like he had only sprained his ankle. I'm fine, Gilpin said, though his voice betrayed a faint sense of urgency. Ingrid nodded. What happened? Gilpin was one of Craeus's people. If he was in this state, something serious must have happened at the Gilpin Guild. He's here. Who? The frog bastard who was in league with the former guildmaster. Ah, frog. There was no need to dig through his memory for this. Right, they said frogs came with the spring. So, they were here now. But wasn't it a little early? Explain. Ingrid decided to listen first. If Craeus were dead or if this were truly an emergency, Gilpin wouldn't have wasted time talking, he would have demanded immediate action. Craeus had already spent 6 days eating and sleeping in the city. For him, a week outside the unit was routine. After all, a deployment is coming up, they said. That meant there was a lot to prepare, food, errands, and various other tasks starting from the beginning of the year. Craeus was in high demand, not just among soldiers, but even officers sought him out. In exchange, many people offered him favors. It had been 6 days, and Craeus wanted to take care of as much as possible before deployment. Ever since taking control of the Gilpin Guild, counting kronas had become one of his small joys. Who would want to return to the unit at this point? Let's see how much I can make today. He needed plenty of kronas to one day open his own saloon. That's why he was determined to earn as much as he could while he had the chance. Recently, he'd even earned a decent commission from selling goods the squad leader had brought back. Wonder if he'll find more stuff like that. Then again, how often do you stumble upon a mage hiding in the sewers? It's lunchtime. Let's eat. Around noon, Craeus called Gilpin for a meal. They were served a dish made from finely ground whole wheat, thin noodles topped with olive oil and tomato sauce. It was surprisingly decent. So, did you seal off the cobbler's basement? Craeus clattered his fork as he asked. It's been sealed for a while now, Gilpin replied after swallowing his food. Though they weren't exactly night watchmen, the Gilpin Guild aimed to act like nighttime guards. That's why they handled tasks outside the Standing Army's jurisdiction, like sealing off the cobbler's basement. The Standing Army didn't bother with such details, they'd already looted the place and left the tunnels behind. Of course, the squad leader had looted it first. But the role of a night watch? That was different. Beyond skimming coin off transient visitors, the guild aimed to project an image of protecting the city's residents. The result? Undeniably effective. It made collecting tribute, protection taxes, and gathering intelligence much easier. In fact, every city resident had essentially become Craeus's ears. With enough effort, couldn't I root out all of Aspin's spies? If the Gilpin Guild absorbed the surrounding ones, it might be possible. But it wasn't time to act yet. Craeus paused mid-meal, his eyes distant as he mulled over his plans. Use the squad leader for muscle. If the squad leader moved, his subordinates would follow. Since each soldier's desires were clear, persuading them wouldn't be too hard. How many people are under me now? Even in border guard slums, there were those scraping by despite their dire circumstances. Recruit some from the slums. Absorb stragglers from other guilds, too. If nothing else, Craeus was confident in his ability to assess people. It might have come from his rough upbringing. During his days as a beggar, he'd quickly learned to judge who to approach for alms and who to avoid. Of course, it took hundreds of beatings to get there. Once he realized that a single misstep could be fatal, his instincts had sharpened like a blade. This might just work. Could he call it an operation to unify the backstreet guilds? With the right foundation, he could dominate the backstreets in less than a year, maybe even 6 months. If everything went according to plan. But plans always had variables. And this was one of them. Boom! Luck and misfortune truly arrived when least expected. For Kreis, it was no different. Someone had smashed through the reception room door and entered. The figure was wrapped in a thick cloak. Kreis didn't waste time wondering how they'd gotten here or who they were. Over a dozen guild members were stationed at the mansion. 2 guards at the door were sprawled on the ground. Blood? No, there wasn't any. They weren't dead, probably just incapacitated. Kreis quickly processed the situation, recognizing the sudden misfortune. His sharp mind went into overdrive as his eyes scanned the room. This way, please. His first words after assessing the situation were measured and calm. You don't even know who I am, but your response is refreshing, the cloaked figure said, shrugging. The motion caused the cloak to ripple. The voice was rough and raspy, as if their vocal cords were damaged. I didn't think that was the important part. You've got good instincts. With that, the figure removed their cloak. Beneath it, they wore armor reinforced with steel around the chest, a heart plate. Ah. It was hard for humans to recognize frogs on sight. Yet Gilpin recognized this one immediately, a frog with a white scar on its neck. The harbinger of death that visited each season. Isn't it too early? Weren't they supposed to come well after spring? Where's the last guy? He got bored of this place and went upstairs, Kreis replied without a hint of panic. Gilpin, however, was drenched in cold sweat. One wrong word, and he could be sent upstairs too. The suffocating pressure of death loomed, an overwhelming gap in power. So, have you eaten? Kreis asked casually. The frog's lips twisted into a grin. You're an amusing one. The frog moved, and Gilpin resisted, but was struck down in 3 blows. It would have ended in 1 if the frog hadn't held back or drawn its weapon. Kreis didn't resist, but he was hit. Humans need to be beaten first before they listen. It's my belief. Who killed the previous guildmaster? After hitting him, the frog grabbed Kreis by the collar and lifted him up. Kreis quickly thought to himself. Which of my squad members could deal with a monster like this? Rem, Ragnar, Odin, Jackson. Which name should I give? Who should I ask for help? The moment he saw the frog, the dilemma vanished, and he answered without hesitation. Cough, I would have told you if you just asked nicely. I don't like it. I want to beat you up first and then hear it. This crazy frog bastard. Despite thinking that inside, Kreis answered with a smile, I see. The border guard's reserve troops did it. The name is Ragnar. Why are you sitting here? I'm an acting guildmaster. Acting guildmaster. Interesting, very interesting. Hey, Baldy. In an instant, the guild member, Gilfin, collapsed, not even knowing how it happened. His eyelids hurt terribly, and his thighs were numb, preventing him from standing. Yes, yes. Bring Ragnar here. Then, I'll let this one go. Gilfin looked at Kreis. Go. Bring our real guildmaster. Gilfin was quick to catch on. He understood the frog wanted someone who could kill him. The frog wasn't stupid, either. Though he couldn't distinguish lies from truth, he knew that this small, delicate human male was up to something. The frog made a decision. I'll kill that guy. Then, I'll put shackles on this one. The person who had originally managed this place was dead, so it was time for a new manager. It would be too much to handle everything from the homeland, so local recruitment was necessary. If things went wrong, leaving the place would be easy. How many days has it been since Kreis was caught? Incrid scratched his nose and asked. 3 days. My squad members. They all headed for the battlefield, coincidentally. Even Rem. I don't know. I only heard they weren't here. Did you confirm that Big Eyes is alive? I saw him just earlier. Did he break his arms and legs? What? No, if he left his arms and legs intact, then... Incrid muttered to himself, then nodded and stood up. Incrid and Gilfin had just moved to a corner outside the unit, talking quietly. Gilfin glanced at Incrid, shaking his head. Wasn't he supposed to go rescue Kreis right away? Ingrid spoke again. First, I'll report back. Then, we can go. Shouldn't we hurry? No, the frog is at the mansion, right? Aren't we going there right now? Right now? It didn't seem necessary. If the frog had wanted to kill Kreis, he would have done it already. But the fact that he hadn't broken his arms and legs after 3 days meant he's holding on well. Kreis's intention was clear. He must have called out a squad member. That's why he mentioned Ragnar. While Rem, Ordin, and Jackson could be brought back somehow. The reason he called out Ragnar, the one who was the hardest to summon, a lazy and directionally challenged person, was clear. He wanted anyone to come. The only one left to call is me. It was a surprise to Ingrid that all the squad members headed for the battlefield without him. Kreis couldn't have expected that either. His reckless squad members had gone to the battlefield listening to someone else's words instead of his own. It was impressive that they managed to get him there. Controlling Rem and the others would give anyone a headache. Tell the frog to wait 1 more day. Gilpin grimaced at his words. The guildmaster is going to die. It was a natural response from Gilpin. He was content with his current life. Being a night guard, or just a lowly guard, was perfect for him. He had little trouble, and it was comfortable. So comfortable. Though Kreis had revealed the secret of Krona, it was still fair. Because of that, Gilpin wanted to protect this peace. The Gilpin who had once planned to escape when the frog arrived, expecting the guild to be torn apart, was gone now. Now, he had something to protect. We need to go. Gilpin said again, but Ingrid shook his head. Go tell him to wait 1 more day. Then, Ragnar will come. With that, Ingrid turned and left. Gilpin, still with no choice, turned and walked back to deliver the message. If he didn't explain the situation, the frog would tear the guildmaster apart. That's what a frog would do. Gilpin walked to repair the shattered piece. Oh God. Looking for a god he didn't believe in. Ingrid headed into the unit. How many days has it been? What's going on? I asked, but they didn't say anything. A soldier who was guarding the unit entrance asked as Ingrid walked in. He's loyal. Ingrid thought about Gilpin and his loyalty. The reserve troops had taken control of the back alley guilds. If luck turned bad, even execution would have been a possibility. That's why no one could speak. But Gilpin still wanted to protect it. That feeling was understood. Some damn business. Ingrid gave a vague response and entered the unit. Kreis wouldn't die just from waiting another day. That much was clear from the frog's attitude. The frog doesn't seem stupid. Though frogs had a reputation for being foolish, he wasn't entirely that way. Like everyone else, frogs had different aspects. A smart frog, a foolish frog, and a meticulous frog. It was the same for fairies, dragons, and giants. Of course, each species had its own unique traits. I have time. No need to rush now. Ingrid clenched and relaxed his fists as he walked. He wasn't stupid. What he learned from today was, I've gotten better. Otherwise, he would have died long ago in a fight with a lycanthrope or an enemy commander. But now, he was even handling mags. Proof that his skills had improved. Could he handle a frog now? He remembered how he had been knocked out by a single kick when facing a pervert. Could he take a frog on now? It seems possible. This wasn't empty confidence. Kreis had called for help, not him. Frog, frog, frog. He was an opponent worth facing. That was the preparation. Though he wasn't badly injured, fatigue had accumulated. He had been awake for 2 nights. He had taken a short nap on the way back, but he wasn't in perfect condition. So, I'll report and rest first. Ingrid decided to do just that. If there was no option but to leave Kreis to die, then he had to face the frog. It would be a troublesome task. But Ingrid couldn't help feeling a strange excitement about the situation. Strange. Very strange. Normally, he would have been frightened, right? No, he would have charged into it knowing he was likely to lose. He couldn't stand seeing his own people die. But now, he wasn't sure if he'd win or lose. Platoon leader? Ingrid entered the unit and saw many people missing. He heard the news that the fairy squad leader had gone out to lead the troublemaking squad. He was wondering who took them. Because of that, Ingrid had to report back to another officer. I'm the only one left from the independent unit, so I'll join up in 2 days. Okay, hurry up if you can. It seems like there's some trouble in the battlefield. There might be a second deployment. The officer mumbled, shaking the letter. Ingrid nodded and turned. After unpacking in the empty barracks, he soaked in hot water, wrapped himself in a warm blanket, and fell asleep. If the frog killed him and today repeated, this sleep would be to keep him in the best condition. Ingrid fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. When he woke up, he wiped the sleep from his eyes, washed his face, and chewed on some meat for breakfast. Eating well in the morning. The cook shook his head. After swallowing the meat, Ingrid performed the isolation technique. It was good for digestion and heating the body, a training regimen. Then he sharpened his longsword and counted the remaining number of his whistle daggers. There were 2 left. He hadn't managed to recover all the thrown daggers. Can that guy make them for me? He thought of a city blacksmith and inspected the blades carefully in front of him. They were fine. There were a few chips, but nothing serious. The blacksmith had said that blades broke when they cut a mage, but they were still intact. Perhaps each mage was different. Once he finished preparing, he heard familiar footsteps. Where have you been? Esther appeared. He thought she had left because he didn't see her earlier. Wait. I'll be back soon. Ingrid stepped outside again. Kyle. Esther hissed from behind. It sounded like she was upset that he was leaving without her. Want to come along? But just watch. At Ingrid's words, Esther jumped up and snuggled into his arms. Feeling her warm body, Ingrid took his first step. The destination was the mansion where Kreis was being held. Chapter 111, Puffed Cheeks. I can't just leave him be. It was surprising that the ferry company commander had taken all the troublemaker squad members, now promoted to platoon members, along. Ingrid wouldn't have believed it himself had he not seen the empty barracks. Naturally, Kreis, who had been absent from camp for several days, wouldn't have known either. That must have been why Kreis had asked him to call Ragnar. Lucky he wasn't dragged along during the sortie. Since Ingrid had remained behind, perhaps Kreis had used that as an excuse to stay as well. Or maybe the ferry company commander had intentionally left Kreis behind as a courtesy. Regardless, Kreis was still here, and the squad members were gone. That meant Ingrid had to take care of things alone. Calling back the squad members from the battlefield was out of the question. And involving the standing army in something within the Gilpin Guild? Not a chance. No one would help him willingly. Sure, if there were someone worth relying on, he might have had hope. The ferry company commander came to mind. Even if she were around, asking for help would still be a gamble. What about Torres? While it might be difficult for him as a platoon leader in the border defense forces, he might have been able to assist personally. But most of the border forces are already mobilized for deployment. The mere fact that they had given Ingrid a day off after his return was proof enough that the unit valued him. Did that mean the mission had yielded substantial results? Ingrid lightly shook his head. His thoughts were becoming cluttered. He needed to focus on the task at hand. The task here was: we're going to rescue Kreis. Yes, big eyes. He patted Esther, who was snug in his chest, as he spoke. Esther looked up at him with puzzled eyes, and Ingrid explained again that they were going to save the big-eyed friend. It was a goal he had spoken aloud almost reflexively. Hearing it, Esther fixed her lake blue eyes on Ingrid. Ingrid, with eyes of a similar hue, met her gaze. What? Of course, Esther didn't reply. A panther wouldn't. Still, her gaze seemed to speak, questioning whether rescuing Kreis was truly the sole reason. Among other things, Ingrid admitted, revealing a part of his intentions. The werewolves, the greyhounds of Aspen, and even the mage, they all lingered in his mind. He wanted to test himself against them, the urge bubbling up like a boiling geyser. Where did he currently stand? How was his condition? How far had his swordsmanship come? How much have I grown? He didn't know. He had no sense of it. That was how it always was. You could only see clearly when you understood, but for Ingrid, each day brought something new. He was an explorer discovering new lands daily. A pathfinder blazing new trails. A mountaineer climbing uncharted peaks and a hunter venturing into unknown territories. Though he followed signposts, he rarely understood where he stood. That was why. The moment he heard of frogs appearing, he had calmly assessed his condition and decided to rest fully for a day before acting. The frog seemed like the perfect benchmark to gauge his progress. Will my sword work against them? The last time he faced a frog, one blow had been enough to make his ribs cry out in protest. This time, though? Not all frogs were the same, but still. They're formidable. There could be no better adversary to compare himself against. If he failed, the frog would become the wall blocking his today. But that was fine. He was prepared for that. Had there been even one squad member present, none of this would have happened. Which was precisely why it fell on Ingrid to take action. Was this a coincidence? Or good fortune? Or perhaps misfortune? Misfortune, after all, had always been like an old friend trailing behind him. It was the swimmer's job to navigate the river of bad luck. Thinking of REM and the squad, Ingrid suddenly realized how narrow his world had been. How ridiculous. Once, he had considered his squad members as mid-tier soldiers. Mid-tier? How laughable. None of his squad members fit within the soldier rank system anymore. Now he knew that. If even one of them had been here, facing a mere frog wouldn't have been anything to worry about. But right now, it's just me. He couldn't abandon Kreis. Nor did he want to back down. With his left foot, he recalled the days he faced REM in battle. With his right foot, he remembered what he had learned from Jackson. With his left foot again, he carried Odin. And with his right, Ragnar. Every step he took was a recollection of all he had learned. From countless instructors, through the repetition of countless days. The fact that the adversary was a frog didn't scare him. Perhaps this was the heart of the beast at work. Calm, composure, boldness, no, more than that, a fierce sense of challenge surged within him. Ingrid's pupils flared like flames. Thud. Esther tapped his chest with her paw, as if to say, not yet. I know. Ingrid answered and kept walking until he arrived at the mansion. The bald Gilpin was waiting for him. Where? The parlor. Where was the parlor again? Following Gilpin's lead into the mansion, Ingrid stopped in front of the parlor door. Am I walking into this prepared to die? Or was he just intoxicated by the thrill of the challenge? He didn't know. The answer lay beyond the door. Esther hopped off his chest, bouncing to the side. Watching her, Ingrid wondered. Will words work with this opponent? Judging by the fact that Kreis was alive and unharmed, they probably would. Still, that didn't mean Ingrid could skip the step of neutralizing his opponent first. If you came to fight, you fought. What would talking achieve? Ingrid took a short breath, deciding to skip words and speak through action. Bang! He kicked the door open, rolled forward, and flung his arm as if tossing something. The whistle dagger zipped through the air at terrifying speed. Is this guy insane? Presence, followed by bloodlust. The piercing intent of a killer, and then the attack. No hesitation. It was as if this sequence had been meticulously planned before he even reached the door. Bang! The door flew open, and the intruder moved. The moment Frog saw the flying blade, he grabbed his weapon, deflecting it in a flash of movement. For an ordinary human, such actions would have been miraculous. But not for a frog. Whoosh! Clang! Thunk! The dagger bounced off his blade and embedded itself into a crude leather ornament on the wall. The one who had thrown the dagger came charging in, sword drawn. Clang! The drawn blade traced a bold arc from above, slicing downward. The frog hooked his fingers into a loop on the sword handle, a design unique to him. Due to his slick, rounded fingers, he had created a weapon he called the loop sword. By curling his fingers through the loop, the frog could grip firmly and swing efficiently. Whoosh! Clang! The clash of steel signaled the start of their duel. Sparks danced in the air as their weapons collided, a relentless series of rapid blows. Ingrid blocked over 30 strikes, even countering occasionally, all the while marveling internally. This guy's fun. But escaping was another matter entirely. What happens if I run away? Everyone else in the guild would die, that's what. Every last one of them. If caught, he'd end up as another pile of meat alongside the dead guild members. That much was obvious. That frog bastard wouldn't hesitate to do it either. They said he'd come in spring, yet he had come earlier than expected. Still, Kreis had his own measure of belief. If even one of his squad mates arrived, things might turn around. Perhaps Rem, Audin, Jackson, or Ragnar. Not the squad leader. When the door swung open, Kreis had hope. When he saw who had barged in, he felt disappointed. And now? Now he was so stunned, his jaw hung open without a single thought of closing it. What is this? What-a-tata-tata-tata? The sound of destruction echoed through the reception room as if it would shatter entirely. What unfolded before his eyes were countless trajectories. Paths carved by blades. Only sparks flew between them. What was this? It was definitely the squad leader who had entered. And yet, that squad leader is fighting against a frog. And it didn't even look like he was being overwhelmed. At least, not to Kreis's eyes. Incrid focused on the opponent's weapon, which seemed to bend as if alive, and raised his blade to counter. Bang! The impact spread from his forearm through his entire body. Simply enduring through brute strength would have been foolish. Instead, he redirected the force. He blended the technique into his movements. What had once seemed impossible was now second nature. Clack! He deflected the blade with a sidestep, letting it slide off, then thrust his sword forward. The blade cut through the air with a hum. The frog retaliated with another heavy strike. Bang bang. Block. Parry. Redirect. Evade. How was this even possible? It was thanks to his experience fighting a mage Thorny Vines. Countless battles had forged the current in Crid. Battles that taught him how to swing, dodge, and defend with his blade. Defense was his foundation. He blocked and blocked again. The enemy wielded a hunting knife-like blade with a wide edge, an uncommon weapon favored by most frogs. Known as a loop sword, it was built for devastating strikes. The sheer weight of the weapon, combined with the frog's extraordinary strength, allowed it to move as if it were a rapier. Incrid lost himself in the rhythm of the fight. The enemy's sword, his own sword. Points connected to lines. Lines curving and crashing like falling lightning. That was the frog's weapon. And Incrid met the descending thunderbolt with his own blade. Unable to redirect the sheer force, his knees buckled slightly under the strain. Even so, he pressed forward with a smooth counter. The frog retreated half a step, thrusting its blade forward. A wide-edged weapon used for a thrust, how unconventional. Yet, to Incrid, that thrust felt like a sharp drill. His heightened senses danced along the edge of the blade. Originally sharp, his instincts had been further honed under Jackson's training, becoming razor-like. In this world where only the blade, his opponent, and himself existed. He lost track of time, engrossed in the battle. Block after block. When he saw an opening, he struck. He slashed, thrust, and parried. He even incorporated techniques from Valin-style mercenary swordsmanship. A feint slash halted mid-swing turned into a piercing thrust. This blended seamlessly with his evolving swordsmanship. Perhaps it could even be called a fusion of northern heavy and precise techniques. The frog resisted most attacks with sheer strength. Their species boasted extraordinary muscle power far beyond humans. Their accompanying reflexes and agility only amplified their physical prowess. Bang! Crack! Thud! Some strikes were dodged, others were deflected. At one point, the edge of a blade grazed his cheek. The frog's fist slammed against his armor shortly after. Incrid countered by stabbing for its heart, but the frog spun its body to evade. Grrk! Foaming with excitement, the frog growled deep from its throat. Incrid, in contrast, maintained utter silence. He simply focused. Focused entirely on one thing. Don't scatter your efforts. Gather everything and focus. He didn't dodge by sight. He trusted the feel of the blade, dodging by instinct. Moments of clarity followed. Incrid entered a new realm of perception. The frog's fingers gripping the loop of its blade. The slight shift in its broad feet. The hidden movements of the violent muscles beneath its slippery skin. His hands adjusted accordingly. His arms moved. His feet repositioned. His torso twisted. Layered concentration upon concentration. Forgetting points, forgetting lines. Incrid glimpsed the next moment of the battle's outcome. It might have been nothing more than a fleeting vision. But he saw it. And having seen it, he understood. He acted immediately. Until now, he had targeted the frog's heart at every opportunity. Only the heart. This thrust was no different. It was a strike imbued with an unyielding will to pierce. The blade flashed through the space between them. The frog shifted its right foot back, dodging with a practiced step. Ping! Grrkk. The blade grazed its chest armor. The frog's cheeks puffed out in agitation. Brack! The strike almost touched its heart. Unable to suppress its fury, the frog's blade fell toward Ingrid's neck with renewed speed. A thunderous slash. The briefest of moments. Ingrid withdrew his blade mid-thrust. Bang! The clash of their blades stopped both mid-attack, suspended in the air. You think you can challenge me with brute strength? Stupid human, the frog growled like a beast. Ingrid responded not with words, but by recreating the vision he had seen. If I do it like this. Ting. He softened his posture by bending his knees slightly, adding flexibility. He absorbed the frog's force by blending heavy and precision techniques. The frog's blade bore down as though it would split Ingrid's head open. You damn fool, Captain! Kreis shouted in alarm. Both combatants ignored him. At the decisive moment, Ingrid pushed with newfound strength, running his blade along the surface of the frog's weapon. Ting ting ting. The energy transferred, unbalancing the frog's stance for a split second. Reflexively, the frog blocked its heart with its forearm. Aiming for the heart would have been meaningless. So instead, Ingrid's blade curved gracefully. Slice! He aimed for the frog's left arm. Though the frog dodged, blood gushed from the wound. It hadn't lost the arm entirely, but the slick, durable skin had been cut through. Even as the frog's cheeks puffed to their limit, its blade countered with brutal precision. Its wide-edged sword swung down with devastating force. Ingrid raised his right hand to block. The blade crashed onto a gauntlet he had taken from a necromancer mage. Crack! Snap! With a jarring sound, the blade deflected. The gauntlet's surface was dented and slashed, but his wrist remained intact. It was the harmony of Odin's deflection training and the gauntlet's resilience. You crazy bastard, the frog muttered. Its left arm hung limp, bleeding freely. Even with its regenerative abilities, this was far from pleasant. The frog glared at Ingrid with terrifying eyes. Ah! Ingrid sensed the end approaching. His right wrist could no longer muster strength, and his blade slipped from his grasp. He caught it with his left hand, but how many exchanges could he endure? He didn't know. But the final strike he had landed gave him a sense of satisfaction. A strike that had aimed for the heart to create an opening. It was truly a commendable move. Frogs, a race known for identifying talent, looked at Ingrid with disgust. Why? Because of his overwhelming talent? No. It was because he was an unprecedented type. A type that had to be killed. Without question, he had to die. Though he seemed to have reached his limit. Chapter 112, Immediate Deployment. For just a single moment. It was clear. How to catch the frog, how to kill it, how to win. The letters carved themselves onto the signpost, and a path unfolded before his eyes. Would this turn into another fulfilling day? To prepare for another repeated today, he had rested well and returned in perfect condition. Now, all he had to do was die and start the day again. Yet, the frog's sword did not descend. The killing intent and aura remained, but the blade did not move. It stopped abruptly in mid-air, as if held by an invisible force. Rumble. The frog repeatedly puffed out and deflated its cheeks. Why? What was invisible to Ingrid's gaze, the frog's own sight, was directed behind the human who had severed its arm. A panther with eyes like a sapphire lake stood there. A lake panther. In some regions, they were treated as sacred beings, even worshipped as guardian deities. But such things didn't matter to the frog. To them, a beast was merely a beast. In other words, it wasn't as though the mere glare of a lake panther was what halted it. What a pain! The frog muttered a curse internally. Its smooth skin didn't sweat but instead secreted a similar mucus-like substance. This was a physical response to tension. The frog, with a white scar on its neck, was no stranger to battle and had faced many mags among its foes. Mags, those peculiar beings who brought the realm of spells into reality. Troublesome adversaries, always a nuisance. The black skin and lake-like eyes of the lake panther exuded such an aura. Through countless experiences and the eyes of a talent appraiser, it could perceive traces of mana. That panther itself could either summon the spell realm or, at the very least, was deeply tied to it. The frog instinctively knew. If it struck with its sword now, it could kill the man. But I'd be risking my life, too. The spell-casting panther wasn't the only problem. The human seated before it wasn't easy prey either. Constantly aiming for its heart, only to shift his sword toward its arm. That final move. The human sword, which had trailed along the broad edge of its blade, the strike, the intent, the aura. It wasn't a simple motion. With calculated footwork, the human had briefly demonstrated strength comparable to the frog's own. Compared to itself, the human was small in stature. The conclusion was clear, the quality of his muscles was extraordinary. Moreover, those eyes. His gaze hadn't faltered. Even now, those eyes burned with fierce determination aimed at the frog. How could he still maintain such a look when he stood no chance of winning? Determination, this human seemed forged entirely from it. It felt as though he was witnessing something unyielding, a force of nature that refused to break no matter what. He wasn't relying on the mage panther behind him. It was pure and unwavering resolve. This crazy bastard. Rumble. The frog's cheek swelled larger than ever. It was thoroughly displeased with this situation. In its mind, it weighed the scales. Was this a foe it needed to kill, even at the cost of its life? Or should it bide its time for a later opportunity? It wanted to kill him, to be rid of this troublesome type of human. But if its life hung in the balance? It had to think differently. The appraising gaze once more scrutinized Incrid. The frog calculated meticulously. While it lived on whims, fighting when it wanted to fight, eating when it wanted to eat, loving when it wanted to love. Its life was now on the line, and it was bound by duty. Should it risk its life and abandon its obligations just to kill him? The scale tipped to one side. There was no point in overthinking it. This city, the border fortress city of Border Guard, wasn't important enough to warrant such risks. The frog's swollen cheeks deflated. The blade poised to strike lowered once more. The aura faded. This is his limit. That was its judgment. This human would not grow stronger than he already was. Exceptional muscle quality, momentary strength comparable to its own, excellent swordsmanship, remarkable tactics, and an indomitable will, it all felt as though this man was an entirely new species. And yet, the frog instinctively understood. Half of it was luck. Despite almost losing its arm in that final move, it had crushed the human's right wrist in return. The human's gambit had relied on luck. Next time, it could kill him. If they met again, it would surely end him. Remember this, human. My name is Mayloon. With those words, it was over. The aura vanished as if washed away, and the frog retreated. Mayloon locked eyes with Esther, who stood behind Incrid. I'm leaving, so stand down as well. That was the message in its gaze. Esther didn't respond. She merely stared silently, her lake-like eyes unwavering. Mayloon picked up its discarded cloak and withdrew. The frog strode out of the mansion with ease, unopposed. Though a few guild members hesitated. Don't just stand there. Step aside and let the guest leave. Creus intervened. Even with one arm disabled, the frog was still the frog. And so, the frog departed. Thanks to the magical tome Incrid had brought, Esther discovered a loophole to remove the shackles binding her body. While she couldn't return to her human form immediately, she could now manifest parts of the spell realm even in her panther form. Of course, I'll suffer every time I do it. She'd have to use her stored mana. And there was a risk of contaminating parts of the spell realm. It was a method outlined in the tome of that lunatic who used corpses to construct his spell realm. An extreme loophole. Still, I might need it someday. It would be useful to know. That's why she had learned it. And now might be that time. Esther had feigned calm while subtly revealing her presence. She made the frog aware that she was a mage. If it struck with its sword, she would pierce its heart with something in return. Willpower, what was it? Willpower could become mana. For a brief moment, Esther made herself appear not as a panther, but as Esther, the mage. And that was the result. The one called Mayloon, or whatever his name was, backed down. If her body had been in perfect condition, it might have been a different story. In the current state, even if Ingrid and Esther joined forces, their odds were only 50-50. That conclusion came after weighing all possibilities. So, the reason their opponent retreated now was simple. It's luck. That was the only explanation that made sense. Had Ingrid's skills improved noticeably? Surprising, yes, even Esther could tell. But that alone wasn't enough reason for Frog to retreat. Of course, before attributing it to luck, there was a twist in the situation. The twist was created by a man who happened to stay by their side due to certain necessities. The left arm. Not the heart, but the arm. Had the focus remained on the heart, Frog would have kept enduring. But with his left arm severed halfway. In this case, reattaching it might take longer than simply letting it regenerate anew. A swordsman with a missing arm. The odds were finally in their favor. Damn it. How did it come to this? Esther sighed, lightly tapping the back of the one who had almost cost her all the mana she had accumulated. Why wasn't this guy getting up? Est? Ooh. It seemed Ingrid had barely held on himself, retching on the ground. Esther hopped backward. Kreyas approached them. You okay? Wait, did you find Ragnar? You understood what I was saying, right? Ha! After retching once, Ingrid, his stomach slightly settled, lifted his upper body and spoke. You've been cooped up here for 6 days without going to the field, and you don't even know where your squad is. Are you really someone who deals in information? You? His tone wasn't scolding but rather calm. Who? Only then did Kreyas realize what he had overlooked. Come to think of it, his squad members were familiar faces he saw whenever he returned. Sure, he'd heard about deployments, but who would have taken the squad out without Ingrid? No sane commander would dare touch this squad of outcasts. A superior killer, a chronic lazy bastard with no sense of direction, a wanderer who vanishes without notice, a fanatic who claims they need divine permission to fight. Seriously, who'd want to deal with a group like that? Naturally, Kreyas assumed they'd wait in the barracks for their squad leader. He'd miscalculated. They're gone. All of them were deployed. Well, that's unexpected. So, it's just you and Esther. Yeah. Kreyas slid a hand under Ingrid's arm, helping him stand. Are you badly hurt? Except for my right hand, I'd say it's manageable. As he answered, Ingrid thought his condition wasn't as bad as expected. But the real question lingered. Why did Frog just leave? With just a swing of the blade, he or Kreyas could have been dead. Why? Ingrid's gaze turned toward Esther, the panther. What exactly did you do? Really? Against a frog of all beings. He was fully grasping the weight of those 2 syllables, frog. What could this young, small panther have possibly done? No clue. He couldn't figure it out. Naya. Feeling his gaze, Esther opened her mouth as if scolding him. As if asking how he could collapse so easily. Ingrid took a deep breath and organized his thoughts. I don't know. Dwelling on the unknown wouldn't yield answers. It never did. He knew this from experience, accepting the unknown as it was and focusing on what could be gained for the future. It worked. How should he describe it? For a fleeting moment, he had felt as though he had overwhelmed Frog. He had drawn Frog into his plan and struck. He severed an arm, not the heart, but the arm. It would regenerate, of course. But not during their battle. If only he had dodged that last strike aimed at his right wrist. If only. The fight could have taken a different course. This skirmish offered plenty of lessons to reflect on. With that thought, Ingrid began walking toward the barracks. Kreyas supported him, and Esther, instead of jumping into his arms, glanced back briefly before following at his side. They had just arrived back at their quarters and were about to rest when. Where have you been? It was the 2nd Company commander, Vengeance's direct superior. Clearly searching for Ingrid, the commander's forehead glistened with sweat. What kind of commander runs around personally instead of sending a messenger? As Ingrid considered this, preparing to salute. Immediately. Deploy. The commander interrupted him. I've sustained some injuries, Ingrid replied. If he had the luxury, he'd have preferred to rest for a day or 2. His absence wouldn't make much of a difference in the grand scheme of the battlefield. After all, he was just a squad leader who'd recently returned. Surely, some leeway could be given. What? How did that happen? It was already known that he'd returned unharmed from the mission. A scuffle with some rogue. At a time like this. Though the commander scolded him, he ultimately shook his head, acknowledging the inevitability. We don't need your swordsmanship right now. If you can move, we simply request you go. The tone wasn't forceful but closer to a plea. To Ingrid, it sounded like trouble had flared up at the front lines. Why? He still hadn't been briefed on the battlefield situation. After returning, he had spent an entire day resting, only to clash with Frog the next. Ranger Finn will accompany you. Can you depart immediately? What's the urgency? Creyas, who had been quietly listening, asked. As someone familiar with the commander, he received a straightforward answer. Well, your platoon said they wouldn't fight anymore unless their leader was brought back. The commander trailed off, but Ingrid understood immediately. My platoon. They insisted on it. This deployment is essentially to convince them. You'll be stationed at the rear, so just staying on the battlefield will suffice. This is a direct request from your company commander. It seemed he had no choice. A sore wrist wasn't reason enough to sit out. After all, he could still grip a sword. REM. Just hearing the explanation left Ingrid uneasy. He figured he could get briefed on the situation en route. All he needed now was to patch up his wounds and head out. Yes. Ingrid saluted, signaling his readiness to depart immediately. Chapter 113, 113, Arrival. Chapter 113, Arrival. All right, I'm back. Today's quota is done. On the third day since deployment, what began with a light provocation and escalated into a melee battle. For 3 straight days, REM went to the battlefield and returned the same way, his twin axes dripping blood, flinging crimson drops onto the ground. Each time he stepped out, he killed exactly 3 enemies. His vigorous axe swings left his foes looking like logs split apart. Except, these logs were alive, spilling brains and guts when cleaved. At the start of the skirmish, when allied and enemy forces clashed, REM swiftly struck, split heads, and returned as if it were routine. A commander who didn't feel a thrill watching such feats should hand in their badge. To those with any discernment, he was a talent they couldn't afford to lose. And yet, REM wasn't the only exceptional soldier in their ranks. I can handle it alone. Why do they keep pairing me with others? This was Ragnar, dragging his feet with boredom. Initially, he drew no attention. He barely fought, just holding out enough to return alive. Unless someone actively provoked him, he didn't throw himself into the fray. Such a waste of talent. The ferry company commander was among the few who recognized Ragnar's potential. She left him be, simply observing, until one day, Ragnar got separated from the group while moving between battlefields. How do you even get lost here? Whether he'd taken a wrong turn around the mountains or secretly crossed a river to raid the enemy's main camp, no one knew. What was certain was that Ragnar wandered into enemy territory, a death sentence, but returned unscathed, casually carrying the head of the enemy commander. I just felt like going left back there, he had said, nonchalantly, the severed head swinging from his fingers as a bonus. You got lost, the ferry company commander asked. Ragnar nodded. That was the end of the conversation. No one had brought him in expecting to enforce discipline. Everyone in the independent unit had been recruited under similar conditions. Fill the gap left by your squad leader, came the order. For them, Ingrid's name was synonymous with magic. Why does HQ send people to us and then tell us to make up for any losses? If you slack off, it'll be seen as Ingrid's directive. Do you want to burden him? Without further argument, they began packing for deployment, a group that normally scoffed at orders. 3 a day, no more, said REM. Sounds good, replied Ragnar. Jackson silently nodded, while Odin, the devout one, declared, in the name of the divine. As for Andrew, Mac, and Henry, they were accustomed to doing whatever they were told. Creyas, however, was absent, having taken leave. Andrew, sporting a swollen black eye, seemed oddly excited to head into battle, and Mac, who bore a matching bruise on the opposite eye, was just as eager. War. Combat. Deployment, they cheered, their enthusiasm unsettling. You're happy about this? You shouldn't be, remarked REM with a sly grin. For a moment, the ferry company commander swore she saw a demon in that smile, though it vanished with a blink. These were the individuals he had brought together. Jackson and Odin were as skilled as the rest. Jackson, for instance, barely seemed to try during fights. Yet, no matter how hard the enemy struck, they couldn't land so much as a scratch on him. "Why can't I hit him?" "Just you wait, you," one frustrated enemy soldier had yelled, but Jackson didn't even reply, treating the threat like a dog barking in the distance. Jackson routinely returned unharmed, having killed no one but taken no damage. Meanwhile, Audin had only entered battle once, but the sight of him casually snapping an opponent's forearm with his bare hands had sent shivers even through his allies. Breaking bones wasn't impressive by itself, but the way Audin gently grasped his opponent's wrist, then snapped it like a twig, was otherworldly. "Stay away! Don't come near me," cried the terrified enemies who witnessed the scene. Even allies found themselves unnerved. Audin's towering frame, smaller than a giant but massive compared to ordinary soldiers, made him impossible to ignore. Less than 10 men, but their combat power, thought the commander. It feels like I'm surrounded by versions of myself, multiplied tenfold. Just outstanding didn't do them justice. Properly utilized, they were a devastating force capable of wreaking havoc far beyond their numbers. That's probably why, she mused. These soldiers had survived despite their many incidents and troubles because they were too valuable to lose. The Fairy Company commander, having taken responsibility for them, continued to observe. This was the extent of the fighting they allowed themselves to do. But what if someone pushed them to go beyond that limit? Who gave you permission to fall back? Who ordered a retreat? A squad leader, newly assigned and clueless about their reputation, had dared to confront them. He didn't know about REM, infamous for attacking superiors, or Audin, who would break bones without hesitation if divine guidance told him to. He didn't know about Jackson's silent lethality or Ragnar's strange, infrequent bursts of action. The first to step forward was Andrew, noticing how irritated REM already looked. "Leave it be, or there'll be bloodshed," he thought grimly. If things escalated, REM might split the man's skull with his axe. "We belong to the independent unit," Andrew stated. "Operational orders come only from our direct superior." "What? So, you're just going to sit back and watch?" The new squad leader couldn't accept it. How could these soldiers lounge in camp while others risked their lives? Independent unit or not, such behavior was intolerable. In the squad leader's defiance, Andrew saw a reflection of his younger self, an ignorant fool who hadn't understood the weight of his actions. Sighing deeply, Andrew looked to the sky before resigning himself. "My name is Andrew Gardner, eldest son of the Gardner family. This unit consists of nobles. Just leave us alone," he said, his voice calm but devoid of sincerity. His face, though composed, betrayed a sense of exhaustion. Mac silently approached and gave Andrew a reassuring pat on the back. "You think being a noble means you can get away with this?" the squad leader shot back. At that, REM moved as if to speak, causing the squad leader to hesitate. "Maybe I should take a closer look at his insides," muttered REM, his tone cold. To prevent further chaos, Andrew challenged the squad leader to a duel and swiftly knocked him down. It was enough to satisfy REM, who refrained from swinging his axe. However, Andrew himself received a thorough beating afterward. "This is the army, noble or not," the Fairy Company commander scolded Andrew, though her words were accompanied by a consoling pat on the shoulder. The independent unit under Incrid, now infamously known as the Madman Unit, owed much of their restraint to Andrew's efforts to keep the peace. There were plenty of reasons, of course. The current position of the 1st Infantry was northeast of Border Guard. They were stationed in a gravel field, with the Penhaniel River on their left and a series of small hills that could be crossed within a day to their right. Here and there, blades of grass peeked shyly through the gravel, and near the riverbank, weeds that reached an adult's waist were scattered sparsely. On the Green Pearl Plains, part of the Knights and the main army were engaged in a standoff against the enemy's main force. The role of the 1st Infantry from Border Guard was to hold the line here, acting as a wall to block the enemy's forces or any detached units trying to flank around. In a way, their fate was tied to the outcome of the battle between the main forces. If their allies struck first, part of the knightly order would sweep through the enemy stationed here. On the other hand, if the enemy moved first, they might find themselves facing enemy knights without support from their own. That's how things started, at least. But with both sides hesitating, this battlefront inadvertently became the opening skirmish, the vanguard clash. 1 infantry battalion and 1 independent company. Both forces were evenly matched in strength and conditions. The main armies of both sides remained stationed on the Green Pearl Plains, watching this battlefield closely. So far, it had been the Norillian forces that were consistently pushed back. Rumors spoke of giant soldiers among the enemy ranks. Some enemy soldiers even stood out, taunting, "Come fight me if you think you're stronger," to provoke their opponents. All of this chipped away at the morale of their allies. Under such circumstances, what they needed was a variable, something to tip the scales of victory. And that variable was clearly visible to the battalion commander. The Madman platoon, undeniably a force that stood out. If they fight properly, that's enough. Do they have any demands? If we push too hard, they'll just reject us entirely. The battalion commander was wise. He immediately recognized the state of the Madman platoon. Though the ferry company commander had somehow managed to bring them along, they were still an uncontrollable group. She could subdue them by force if necessary, but that wasn't the time for it. The battle hasn't been lost yet. The fight was only just beginning. Battalion Commander Marcus was a battle maniac, not a fool. He knew that persuading them through reasonable means would raise their morale far more than coercion. "We need their platoon leader." The ferry company commander's response was direct, and the battalion commander granted permission without hesitation. "Bring him here." That was the end of it. The company commander saluted and turned away. Earlier that morning, REM had declared, almost as a demand, "Bring our platoon leader here." Fighting without knowing whether he's dead or alive doesn't feel right. It had sounded more like a threat to stop killing 3 enemies a day if they didn't comply. Immediately, a swift reconnaissance messenger was dispatched. 3 days later, the platoon leader, Ingrid, stood before the company commander. The Madman platoon had been brought to the rear to welcome Ingrid back, which was why they had managed to meet him within 3 days. "If you've returned, shouldn't you report in immediately? Didn't you miss me?" The company commander greeted Ingrid with a Ferris-style joke. Ingrid's expression twisted in response, much to the commander's delight. Seeing that scowl washed away the frustration she'd felt from dealing with Ingrid's unruly platoon members. Thick-headed fools. The commander's gaze landed on Ingrid's right wrist. "Injured? I had a scuffle with some thugs in the city. Were those thugs frogs, by any chance?" At those words, both Creus and Esther turned their gazes sharply toward the commander. Ingrid remained calm. It was likely just another joke. "It's not a serious injury. The wrist wasn't broken. While the bone was damaged, it wasn't enough to stop him from gripping or wielding a sword. Treatment was necessary, but it wasn't a critical wound. His dedication to wrist training through isolation techniques had paid off. In any case, welcome back to the team." The green-eyed company commander spoke, and Ingrid saluted. The fairy returned the gesture with a slight nod. "Now, off you go." Ingrid headed straight to where his platoon was gathered. He had been eager to return. Even though they caused trouble when he was with them, the chaos they stirred when he wasn't around was on a completely different scale. "Should I just quit?" Initially, even platoon leaders had tried to provoke him. Now, not even those kinds of people were coming around. Playing around with Andrew had become tedious as well. "There's no reason to stay here anymore. Leaving would be simple." REM wasn't thinking about an honorable discharge like others. No, he'd just disappear without a word. The longer he was apart from Ingrid, the more this thought grew. "If he doesn't show up today, I'm leaving." Yet, REM continued to repeat the same dull routine each day, a monotonous cycle of meaningless battles that didn't even stir his interest anymore. Die. It was tedious, so tedious. If they were going to kill someone, they should just stab with their spear already. Why waste time shouting? The distraction caused their breathing to falter, making the spear tip waver without them noticing. REM swung his axe vertically. The axe blade struck the spearhead. Clang! Goo! The enemy soldier lost their grip on the spear, their hands torn apart. Losing a weapon in the middle of a battle? This guy didn't have a fraction of the platoon leader's skill. No, comparing them was an insult, a sin. Crack! The axe split the enemy soldier's skull. Still, it was just as dull as ever. After killing 3 enemies, REM returned, caught in the same repetitive cycle of boredom and tedium. Even after being moved to the rear, where there were no battles, he found himself with even less to do. Ragnar was in a similar state. He lacked motivation above all else. Did he die? Otherwise, why was there no word from him? With the platoon leader absent, everything felt stagnant. Ragnar spent his days aimlessly, doing everything half-heartedly. Apart from slaughtering a dozen enemy soldiers when he got lost once, he hadn't done anything. Odin prayed to his god and asked, "Is it time for me to leave?" As always, his god answered with silence, respecting Odin's free will. The decision lay in Odin's heart. To leave or not to leave? Odin asked himself but had yet to decide. Jackson, meanwhile, had joined the military with a purpose. Now that the purpose was almost fulfilled, there was no reason to stay. It was time to leave. Lingering here was pointless. Logically, that's what he thought. Unnecessary and meaningless tasks. Days of inefficiency that would have been unthinkable before. And yet, he remained. Tonight. Jackson resolved to leave, though it was the third night in a row he'd made that decision. As another ordinary day passed with everyone lost in their own thoughts, the sun began to set, casting dark shadows across the camp. Someone entered the tent of the so-called madman platoon, now cloaked in silence. "I'm back." The voice was calm and steady. As always, Ingrid had returned. Everyone in the tent fell silent, their gazes shifting. Unexpectedly, the first to react was Andrew. "Uff. Why? Why did you take so long?" Tears streamed from Andrew's face as he rushed to greet him, his tear-streaked face a testament to his pent-up emotions. His sobs conveyed everything he'd been holding inside. Ingrid, seeing Andrew's face, couldn't help but laugh softly. "Why is he faster than me, and why is he throwing a fit?" "You back?" REM's voice came from behind Andrew. Beyond him, Ragnar, Odin, and Jackson also appeared. Chapter 114, Crawling Forward. Chapter 114, Crawling Forward. The soldier guiding Ingrid to his quarters rubbed his eyes. He felt as though he had seen something wrong. Did I really see that? No, it couldn't be. His eyes must be playing tricks on him. The moment the platoon leader appeared, a soldier named Ragnar abruptly stood up from his seat. Why is he jumping to his feet? Ragnar was notorious for rarely getting up, even in dire situations. Among the madman squad, he was often called the lazy madman. And now, this guy, who never stood unless absolutely necessary, had shot to his feet in one swift motion. It was a sight that would have made anyone familiar with him, especially those who had observed him recently, slap their thighs in disbelief and leap to their feet in astonishment. What's wrong with him? This was the kind of guy who shocked people just by standing up. That guy. Even when told repeatedly to get up, move, or prepare for an enemy attack, he wouldn't listen, no matter how much they yelled at him. "You're late," Ragnar muttered curtly as he grabbed his sword. "I need to check if I've regressed during this time." As if standing up wasn't startling enough, he suddenly proposed a sparring session. And he was the one initiating it? While harsh words occasionally flew within the squad, Ragnar rarely even acknowledged them. Yet here he was, suggesting a duel. With his sword in hand, he radiated an eagerness to move, his stance screaming his desire to swing his blade right then and there. "Are you out of your mind?" REM stepped in to block him. "You know the first sparring match is always mine, don't you? Isn't that right? What's with this guy now?" REM, known simply as a madman, was notorious within the squad. He was the most unhinged of them all, the kind of maniac who swung his axe without reason and erupted into fits of rage at the slightest provocation. Yet now, the madman was smiling. It wasn't a mocking smile or a murderous grin. It was pure, genuine laughter. When combined with his barbaric appearance, the smile even made him seem almost innocent. "Are you hurt?" And now, he was expressing concern for someone else. Who would have thought this axe-wielding lunatic, known for splitting skulls, could care about someone's well-being? The soldier accompanying them was one of the battalion commander's aides, tasked with observing Ingrid. He had been assigned to gather information about this peculiar squad leader while guiding him around. But the scene unfolding before his eyes felt utterly surreal. "Doesn't seem broken," muttered another soldier. "Oh, now he's joining in? This guy? He can talk?" There had been a time when he mingled with other squad members, but recently, he had devolved into nothing but a silent, glaring lunatic. People had even speculated that he had bitten off his own tongue somewhere along the way. His name was Jackson, wasn't it? People called him that clear-eyed madman. His gaze was so unsettling that it could make a person's skin crawl, yet it was strangely captivating. "Did you apply any ointment?" Hearing the clear-eyed madman speak was a rare event. But now, he even stepped forward to examine the squad leader's wrist. This has to be a dream, thought the aide. What the hell happened to these guys? The final member of this quartet of chaos was the holy madman. Among the squad, his reputation had already spread far and wide. He was easily the most noticeable of the group, with a build reminiscent of a massive boulder. Despite his intimidating size, he wore a gentle smile. Unlike the others, he was unfailingly kind. Of course, that didn't mean he always followed orders. Whenever he prayed, a faint halo seemed to glow around him, lending him an air of sanctity. He looked like someone who could crush an entire enemy unit with a single blow, yet he refused to fight, claiming he couldn't act without divine calling. To the aide, this guy was the real lunatic. A true priest receives divine favor and demonstrates it with holy powers. But this guy? He had no holy powers to speak of. What was this divine will he kept mentioning? He used it as an excuse to shirk duties, day after day. If he was going to act like this, why had he even joined the military? The holy madman spoke with his usual serene smile. Brother, it seems you've been neglecting your training. Injuries like this happen when you're lazy. You should train more. Train. Whether or not he truly believed in the divine, the holy madman had no qualms about criticizing others with a friendly demeanor. A noble killing madman giggling away. A clear-eyed madman staring concerned at a wrist. The lazy madman suddenly looking energetic. And now the holy madman scolding people. The aide felt overwhelmed by the absurdity of it all. The only person who could possibly make sense of this mess was the man they all called their leader. The aide turned his gaze to Incrid. Unbothered by the chaos, Incrid simply examined his surroundings and said, "It's not broken." After a brief glance around, he added, "What the hell have you all been doing while I was gone? Why is the squad not the troublemaker squad anymore but the madman squad?" It had only been 8 days since he'd last seen them. How had things escalated to this point in such a short time? Incrid's question was entirely valid. IEM, as usual, responded without hesitation. "It's because we didn't have a squad leader. This is all your fault. Everything is your fault." The madman's answer was as nonsensical as ever. So, about that sparring match. The lazy madman picked up on the conversation. Underestimating minor injuries will only cause bigger problems when it matters. Take off the bandages first. Madman squad? Who's calling us that? I've never heard of it. I have no idea what you're talking about, squad leader chimed in the clear-eyed madman. The holy madman, ever consistent, added his own unique flavor. Brother squad leader, are you playing favorites? Did you neglect us for divine reasons? We need more discipline. The aide had expected Incrid to reprimand them harshly. After all, they were a squad in disarray, and the bruised and teary-eyed Andrew was undeniable proof of internal discord. What happened to his eye? Incrid asked, pointing at Andrew. Oh, that? It was just some sparring. To help him improve, answered the madman with an axe. Well, that's fair, Incrid agreed. Fair? His eye was swollen shut, and his face was practically unrecognizable. Still, I'm staying here. I'm not leaving from under you, Andrew declared boldly. IEM smirked. That's why I like you. Wait a moment. I've got a match to settle with our squad leader. IEM's grin only widened as he chuckled in apparent happiness. Meanwhile, the aide could only watch in disbelief as the chaos continued to unfold. The aide, tasked with observing Incrid by the battalion commander, knew he'd have to report everything he saw, even this madness. The clear-eyed madman began unwrapping bandages. Somewhere nearby, a black panther with bright blue eyes yawned lazily. Nya. And as Incrid turned his gaze to the aide, the rest of the squad followed suit, their stares piercing and expectant. Not leaving? Incrid asked. It didn't sound like he was suggesting he linger here together. Oh, yes, I'm going. Please rest well. The aide turned and walked away. After he left, IM tilted his head and asked, why'd he tag along? He's been rolling his eyes at us for days now. Rolling his eyes? Kept staring at me. Thought he was asking to get killed, so I was planning to decorate his head with an axe tomorrow. You lunatic, that'd be murder, not assaulting a superior. Is that so? He wasn't asking because he didn't know. Especially with that sly grin, it was clear he knew exactly what he was saying. Leave him be. Don't go stirring trouble with a superior. Especially since that guy's under the direct command of the battalion leader. If it comes to that, I'll just retire. Of course, for REM, retirement would likely mean a dramatic escape from the army with his 2 axes. While Ingrid and REM exchanged words, Jackson knelt on one knee, pulling out his balm and rubbing it on his wrist. A cool, soothing sensation spread over his wrist, cold, refreshing, and tingling in an oddly satisfying way. It didn't seem like an ordinary medicine. Perhaps it had been a while since he last felt this way. Still, Ingrid got to the point. Let's try to align ourselves with what those above us are saying. He had overheard why he was urgently summoned. The battlefield was teetering on the brink of chaos, morale was dropping, and disturbances had broken out within the unit. The nickname Madman Platoon wasn't just for show, it embodied their reputation for causing havoc. Executing the lot of them to tighten military discipline would be a waste of their skill. But tolerating them and attempting to manage the chaos seemed equally daunting. The company commander must have shielded them. The ferry company commander often took care of the unit and its members in subtle ways. Even bringing Ingrid's platoon here was likely for similar reasons. The decision to reorganize them into an independent platoon under the company commander's direct control wasn't an easy one. Ingrid understood how it might look to others if his platoon refused to act simply because their leader wasn't around. That's why they were brought here. Despite any worries about how it would play out, this much was clear to Ingrid. Of course, Creyas had explained everything along the way. However, there was still one glaring issue they seemed to overlook. They don't actually listen to me. Even when breaking up fights, words didn't work, he had to physically intervene. If he told them to go out and fight, they'd likely ignore him. That was the case now, too. None of them were paying the slightest attention to what Ingrid was saying. They let his words go in one ear and out the other. They had no intention of aligning with anything coming from above. What can I do? This was the Madman Platoon, a rowdy, unpredictable bunch. Jackson, after reapplying his bandages, spoke with his gaze lowered. Don't overdo it, but it's your burden to bear in the end. He probably knew there was no point in saying this. Jackson took a step back. Yeah. My burden to bear. After these words, Creyas, who had been standing silently in the back, finally spoke up. Am I invisible to you all? Who? You're here. Yeah, I saw you. Welcome, brother. The 3 of them, excluding Jackson, responded one after another. Jackson merely gave a slight nod in greeting. After all, Creyas had been involved with them in various ways. Mostly in exchanging information, arranging contacts, or selling medicines. Creyas knew better than to expect anything from them, so he was satisfied with the current state of things. Afterward, it was time for sparring. When they rushed out in front of the barracks, Henry finally acknowledged them. Honestly, it's terrifying to even approach you guys. In some ways, Sir Andrew is commendable for stepping in so boldly. Henry's face was unscathed. It seemed like he was adept at keeping himself out of trouble. On the flip side, it just shows he's only capable of so much. While Henry hadn't clashed with anyone in the unit, he hadn't built any close relationships with them either. Ingrid didn't judge people recklessly. But he trusted his platoon's judgment. If none of them kept Henry close, it meant they didn't expect him to contribute much to the group. Even so, Ingrid didn't tell him to pack up and leave or make some dismissive comment about retiring. Who was he to say such things? He himself had told them all to give up and quit, and yet here he was, still holding a sword. Yes, he hadn't given up. Not once had he backed down. Even if he had to crawl, he had kept moving forward. That was the essence of Ingrid. Crawling, taking one small step at a time, he had made progress. Even now, despite his injured wrist from fighting the frog, he could show them something. He could demonstrate the results of his persistence and the strength he had built. And he believed he could do it again now, just enough to avoid overstraining his wrist. It didn't seem like an impossible task. I'm first. REM stepped forward, grinning as he swung his axe. No signal to start, no warning. Ingrid met him head-on with his sword. REM's arm whipped like a lash, and his axe blade seemed to bend unnaturally, stretching as if alive. In response, Ingrid's sword curved too. As both weapons were swung at high speed, their after images blurred together and the axe blade clashed against the sword. Clang! One strike, one exchange. That alone made REM's lips curl upward. Well, would you look at that? REM muttered, his grin growing wider. The clash of steel against steel rang out, echoing in the night and causing a commotion. What's going on? Is it the Madman platoon again? What now? As word spread that it was a sparring match involving the Madman platoon, soldiers gathered to watch. This time, it wasn't just the usual infighting, there was a new face in the mix, making it a spectacle worth seeing. Some even recognized the newcomer. Vengeance, for one. Others who had fought alongside him in previous battles. Or the squad leader who had stitched up Incrid's elbow guards. Even those from the Frontier Defense Force or those who had faced him in promotion matches were present. Clang! Clang! The sounds of steel meeting steel, sparks flying, and reverberations filled the air. Everyone watched the sparring match between REM and Incrid in silence, utterly captivated. What is this? Someone muttered, echoing the collective thought of the onlookers. Incrid. That Incrid. Even though he had recently been promoted to a high-ranking soldier, he was still considered far inferior to most of them. A frequent subject of ridicule, often called a foolish squad leader. Now, he was. Clang, clang, clang. Moving so fast that his strikes were almost invisible, swinging, deflecting, and thrusting his sword as it met REM's axe. REM, who had earned admiration from some of his comrades for his ferocity and achievements in cutting down enemy ranks, was evenly matched with Incrid. At least, that's how it appeared to their eyes. And it didn't end there. Let's continue this later. Plenty of others are waiting. In the middle of the sparring match, REM stepped back. Then Ragnar stepped forward. After Ragnar, it was Odin's turn. One by one, they took their turn sparring with Incrid, and he held his ground against each of them.